better go back in the bank.
Really?
They look to me as if they've been excavated. Are you a sort of amateur archaeologist?
Work on building sites. And
Work on a building site? Uh-huh.
Yes.
And where were these from?
Excavations we've done someplace in the city. I can't remember the site though. So
How long ago was this?
15 years.
Really? And you dug these up
Yes.
and kept the bits?
Yes.
Do you know what it is?
No.
Okay, well, let's get rid of this one first. This is 17th century. Could be English or continental, it's impossible to say. And it's of no interest whatsoever.
Right.
This is Delftware. This is a tin-glazed earthenware. And the idea of this was to produce a white surface on a coloured clay body. You can see it's a very yellowy, creamy colour. And to make it white and more like Chinese porcelain, they put a tin glaze on it. And they then paint on it. Now, mostly they were just flowers or scenes, but occasionally they did commemorative pieces. Have you tracked down who this is?
No.
You don't know who it is? What
No.
do you think this was?
Just a couple of letters.
A couple of letters. Okay. Well, that I stands for Jacobus, James. And that is DV, is actually DU, and there should be an X on the end, Dux, Duke. And this was when James II was Duke of York during the reign of Charles II. This is about 1665. So it's a very early plate. And it's a very rare plate. The nice thing about it is that the portrait is so good. Normally they're very cursory and really rather silly, but that's actually quite sensitively done and very rare. Although it's damaged, this would be wanted desperately by a museum. London Museum would want it, collectors would want it, and I don't think, I mean, how much would you accept for it? You dug it up, you got it for free. How much would you, if somebody made you an offer, what would you sell it for?
I wouldn't know.
£20?
No, I
£100? Come on, you're getting tempted.
after the information you give me there.
£500? 1,000? 2,000?
Probably be tempted to give it value first, maybe.
£2,000?
Yeah?
10,000?
Jeez.
I think it could make £10,000. It's such a rare, desirable piece.
It was my great-grandfather's.
So how long ago would that be?
Maybe 1910, but we don't really know when he would have had it, but we think maybe around that date. And it's just been passed down through the family, and it now belongs to my brother.
And do you have any idea where it originated from?
We've just been told that it's a Brazilian yellow diamond, and apart from that, we don't know a thing.
Well, it's actually interesting you should say that it's Brazilian, because nowadays most people associate diamonds with southern Africa. But in fact, diamonds were originally found in India, and all the diamond mines were worked out about 1725.
Right.
And then, very conveniently, around the same time, they found them in Brazil. And the Brazilian mines went on until they found diamonds in South Africa, which was not till pretty late in the 19th century. So it's very likely that this diamond did actually originate from Brazil.
And did they specifically find yellow diamonds in Brazil?
Well, they find white, yellow, all colours, because after white diamonds, the range goes from yellow to brown, and this is actually quite a good colour yellow. It's not a really strong, fancy, intense yellow. Also, the cutting's quite interesting because it's a 19th century cut. You'll see it's not round like most modern cut diamonds. It's more what's called cushion shape, TV screen shape, I would think. And also, if you look through the stone, you'll see that there's a slice off the bottom.
You can see
it's called
right
the culet, and that's something you don't get in a modern diamond either.
So do you think it's always been a ring?
No, I don't think it's always been a ring, because actually the stone is much older than the setting. And with diamonds, they tend to get unset and reset and unset and reset, and it happens all the time.
So what kind of dates the setting?
Well, the setting probably dates from around 1910, because it's platinum, and platinum's a great material for mounting jewellery because it's very, very hard. But they hardly used it at all because it's very difficult to solder until around 1900, when they improved their technology. It's quite a big stone. I got a little gadget here that sort of very roughly measures the size of diamonds, but it only goes up to 2.5 carats. And 2.5 carats goes nowhere near that. And also these stones are quite heavy because they cut them much deeper than modern stones. So I think that this stone probably weighs somewhere between 4 and 5 carats. It's quite sizable. So you don't actually have this insured or anything, as well? It doesn't have insured.
It's on the household contents insurance.
So you get £500 for it if it was stolen.
Something like that.
If it was a really, really strong yellow colour, it'd be worth a huge amount of money. But even with this pleasant yellow colour, weighing between 4 and 5 carats, this has got to be insured for, well, at least £12,000. Anything between 12 and 15,000, I would say.
That's quite a lot.
It's really a super ring.
Now, would you be upset if I told you that this was a souvenir? Would that?
It might well be. I don't know where it came from. It was just sitting in the bank, really. I don't know where it came from at all.
How amazing. Well, originally it came from Rome, and it's the sort of object that would have been brought back by a first-class grand tourist visiting Rome. And it's perfectly obvious that it's a Roman ruin. I mean, there's no, at least an Italian ruin, but what's more significant and points us towards the fact that this is a very grand souvenir is that it's laid out in micro-mosaic. Have you thought about this technique at all?
No, I know nothing about it.
No. Well, if it's made up of tiny, tiny pieces of glass and some perhaps hard stones too, that are laid into a background minutely and very accurately, and it's a sort of miracle of human craftsmanship.
It's tiny, little bits.
And it refers back to the mosaics of ancient Rome, the Byzantine mosaics, the Roman mosaics, that such a man would go to visit. And so he might well have brought this back to a member of his family who had not had the pleasure of visiting Rome with him. But this is quite a lavish thing. There's quite a lot of plate powder in the surface of it, which prevents us from understanding immediately that this is a rather ravishing gold box. Solid gold. It's marvellous.
Is it really? I didn't know it was gold.
Yes, absolutely. It's actually a very matte gold, and gold is very malleable material. You can push it around and engrave it and texture it. And this is exactly what's happened here. The two marvellous sort of neoclassical griffins, rather fierce-looking chaps with beards, and it's lined with a very smart band of enamel, which is an echo of the band of enamel on the front. What about date? Any thoughts? Any ideas?
I don't know. It was just in... My mother died a few years ago, and it was just in a box in the bank, you know, so I know really nothing about it. What would she have put in it?
It's a snuff box, notionally.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Because it's tiny, isn't it? I mean, it wouldn't fit a cigarette or anything.
No, absolutely not. No, snuff it is, and this is a very, very eloquent and beautiful example from about 1820. Now, having said that it was almost certainly bought in Rome, the great surprise is that it's not made in Rome, it's Swiss.
Oh, really?
Yes. And all they've done is incorporate a mosaic, which does come from Rome.
Yes.
It's hugely enviable. I think everybody behind us would love to sort of snatch this out of our hands, wouldn't they, and run away with it. I would. And because of that, it's really quite a valuable object. And so, goodness, what shall we say? £15,000?
Gracious. Whoa. I think you'd better go back in the bank.
So, perhaps I'll go with it. Brilliant. Absolutely marvellous. Thank you so much. Fabulous.
I was drawn to the drama of the scene and the idiosyncratic colouring and the line in particular, and I discovered that Michael Ayrton was first and foremost interested in drawing, honed his skill through studying Dürer's woodcuts, and I see this etching here, beautifully detailed, and then the drama, the sweep of the
Yes.
gulls, the wings of Buffon. The whole thing is lifted.
It's got a lot of movement.
I
in it,
love
doesn't
the
it?
light against dark, dark against light. The whole thing is beautifully balanced
Yes.
and poised. Just at the moment, I think the tide is on the turn, possibly.
You think it's been ebbing, it's coming back
I
in?
think so, and
Yeah.
for me it captures the sort of ebb and flow
Yeah.
of life. I don't think he's had the recognition he deserves, really.
Because what was he? I mean, he was a great
diversified.
critic.
Yes.
I mean, perhaps he's first and foremost to some remembered for being a great critic.
Theatre designer.
Decades with the Spectator as their leading critic, wasn't it?
Yes.
Theatre designer,
Yes.
and then a sculptor in later
Indeed,
life.
yes. I think I can see that coming here with the
Very
way he's
sculptural,
moulded
isn't it?
these,
Yeah, in some way.
dukes.
You mean the way he's used the brush to leave those marks from the brush in the slabs of paint?
Yes.
And then he seems to have filled those with colour. That's not dirt.
I don't think
No,
so.
it's colour,
Don't
isn't it?
tell me to have it cleaned.
No,
because
I-
I'm inclined not to.
I think cleaning pictures until you fully understand them is a very dangerous thing to do.
Exactly.
Now, this one, if you cleaned all that off, I think you may be losing quite a lot
I
of what
think
the artist
so.
wants to
I
put
think
across.
so.
A certain
Yes.
gloominess, a certain twilight mood, you know. But I love the way these seagulls come out of, almost like bits of seaweed or bits of driftwood on
Yes,
the
it's
on the
organic.
tide. Organics are
Indeed.
growing out of it, and I think the whole thing's very moody and very, very 50s colour, but it's actually dated 1946. But at this moment in time, I believe that he was very highly regarded, much more so than any of his peers. He was seen as the great white hope of British painting.
How does he rate now? Because one doesn't hear quite so much about it.
Less so.
Yes.
I mean, it's probably reflected in the value of the picture. I mean, what did you pay for it? If you don't mind me asking.
No, I paid £250
Yes.
about 25 years ago.
Well, an auction estimate might be £6,000 to £8,000. But I think the correct price for this picture ought to be closer to 15.
I think worth every penny. I haven't finished looking at it myself yet.
There's a lot to come, isn't there? It's a
There
very
is.
complicated picture, and
Yes.
it's going to reward for
It's
years.
a very intelligent picture.
Very intelligent.
I think one can spend 20
It's
years
layered,
and
isn't it?
more looking at it, and I certainly intend to do that.
A pair of whatnots. Curious word, isn't it?
It is, yes. Do you know the origins of it?
Actually, no. I mean, really, they are étagères, stages, platforms, and were developed in the latter part of the 18th century from France. And then, during the 19th century, they became multiform, with columns in every shape and size, particularly by the sort of 1860s, 1870s. In the 1880s, it started to get very much more elegant. A renaissance of classical style came in, and superb quality whatnots developed like this. And I think that name stemmed from the fact that somebody would say, "Where shall I put this, mother?" And they'd say, "Well, put it on the whatnot." And the name stuck, absolutely. Yes. I can think of no other reason.
No.
Now, this very style is typical of the makers of the 1870s, 1880s, the top quality. They're Crace and Son, Holland and Son, and of course Gillows. And they followed this line of ebony and a strong contrasting timber. And then you'll see here, outside this, framing it, is this strong ebony colour, black ebony, and then this beaded edge, which actually sparkles. And the note of quality is the amount of it there is round all the edges. And another piece of quality are two drawers in each. Usually one either in the base or sometimes one in the top, but one each end is pretty good. And nice to see the original little knobs here with their carved wood fascia. And when we open the drawer, there you are. You've got Gillow & Co., the magic name. The magic name. If you pull the two together, there are just slight differences in the pattern. You can see there you have a plain groove or a reed. Here you have a little heart at the top, a little heart shape. And there's a slight difference in the size of the turned feet.
Yes.
So not quite a pair, a matched pair. Gillows had innumerable differences, slight differences in their patterns. It really, to all intents and purposes, matters not. Now, any maker's name on a piece of furniture adds to the value, not only the historical value, also the monetary value. And in this case, of course, Gillows probably the greatest increase in any name on a piece of furniture, certainly in the 19th century. Now, Have you had these a long time? I mean, this is sort of
No,
family.
we've just had them about 3 years. And,
Oh, really?
Yes. We saw them in a local antique shop. We thought they looked so neat and well proportioned, and then we realised that they were Gillow. We just liked them, thought they were very attractive.
Oh, they're charming. They're as good as you'll see. If we take this little piece here, that would cost today in the region of probably £4,500–5,000 without the name on. With the Gillows name, double at 9,000. A pair, even a matched pair, would be certainly 22,000. They are so desirable, they're so fashionable. These are ideal pieces of furniture.
Wow, it's amazing.
And you bought extremely well.
Given to us about 10 years ago by a man who tried to teach me Latin and history at school, and who subsequently visited us often in Greece and Italy, where we lived some years. And when he became too old to live at home, he went into a nursing home, and he decided to give various pieces of furniture to friends and to a number of his ex-pupils.
What a lovely present. Absolutely gorgeous present. What date do you think it is?
I think it's about 1700, but I'm not sure.
I think you're absolutely spot on. It's a lovely example of a walnut marquetry long case clock. And this convex moulding just underneath the hood here is really a sign of either prior to 1700 or just around 1700. Are you a bit of a botanist or not?
No, I'm afraid not.
So you can't identify some of these beautiful flowers. And again, down here and also on the plinth. I think that is a lovely example. That is where it starts to go just a little bit wrong, because the initial thing here is you should have had some lovely barley twist ebonized columns on each side of the hood. They've obviously come off. They can be replaced. So the clock is signed by William Threlkeld of London. And although I haven't got my tape measure with me, that is an 11-inch dial. Most of them were 12, and a little bit earlier they would have been 10-inch. The 10-inch obviously being the most desirable because they're the smallest clocks. And other things to look for an early clock are nice early spandrels, and you've got tulip engraving here between the spandrels on north, south, east and west of the dial. You've got a lovely rosette in the centre, and you've got ringed winding holes. Let's just, not actually quite that heavy, but have a little look at the movement. And we've got 5 ringed pillars, which is what I'd expect. And some, well, not the best rebushing in the world, in all honesty. That's had a hard life, that movement. They've also used some fairly modern screws to put the spandrels on. When was this last restored or cleaned?
About 8 years ago.
Right. So the clockmaker might have done all that at that time.
Yes, I think he might have, yes.
Right, right. Well, he's also sadly left you with a rather squat, very, very heavy seconds hand. That should have been a lovely slender one, and that hand is not original either. Just opening the inside of the case to look at various things, and yeah, again, you can see very clearly how the lovely original hinges would have come right round here, and you can see the 2 holes which would have held them. The main thing is it was a lovely present. So, marvellous.
Yes.
So he gave it to you roughly how long ago?
About 10 years ago.
Just before you had it restored?
Yes, yes.
And did you have any sort of indication of what it might be worth when he gave it to you?
Well, we had it valued subsequent to his death, and they thought it was worth something between £5,000 and £6,000.
Right. Well, that was probably a reasonably good quote those years ago. These things have shot up through the roof because they're very desirable, and there aren't actually that many left in nice condition. Retail, you'd be looking for a nice 11-inch marquetry, somewhere between sort of 18 and £24,000.
Really?
Mm. It's a jolly nice clock.
And he wasn't a very wealthy man. He had no idea, I think, of the value of what he was giving us.
James Anderson, who owned these things originally, retired in Sutton, where I live.
Sutton, Ontario.
Sutton, Ontario, yes, on Lake Simcoe, and a lot of his descendants still live there. And they gave us some artifacts and some furniture and this jacket.
I assume you're aware of who Mr. Anderson was?
Yes, he was the chief factor of the Hudson's Bay Company and in Port Resolution. And,
that's correct. And not just any chief factor.
No, he was appointed by the Hudson's Bay Company to lead an expedition, he and Mr. Stewart, to try and find what happened to Sir John Franklin.
The Franklin expedition.
Yes.
And we have here, this letter is a letter asking Mr. Anderson to search for Mr. Franklin.
Yes.
So Mr. Anderson, not only a very important factor in the fur trade, but led a fairly important search looking for the Franklin expedition,
yes.
which was a very tragic event in Canadian history.
It certainly was, yes.
Here we have a letter inscribed on parchment at Anderson's retirement, stating his honorable service for the company, and dated 1st of December 1857 when he retired from Fort Resolution,
yeah.
which is up in the Great Slave Lake area.
That's right.
And that brings us to this object here,
yes.
dated to the middle part of the 19th century. And if we can look here, it's got all of this wonderful leather fringe. It's probably moose hide. And if we can look at the back here, and this is really quite fantastic. If we can just pull this fringe out of the way, we have this band of woven porcupine quill work decorating the back of the jacket. Really quite fantastic. This on its own, with all of this extraordinary history, would be a fairly important thing, but when we add all of this together, it's one of the most important objects. I've been doing this for 24 years, and we search for history associated with objects, and we almost never get this sort of thing
isn't
together.
That exciting?
I can tell you I am very excited. Beyond just the monetary value, to have this kind of history still kept together is
yes.
a fantastic thing. Well, I understand you have a couple of other things that were
yes.
too large to be brought
yeah,
back in?
Yeah, we have his portrait, a beautiful portrait of himself and of his daughter and his son.
I almost am hesitant to talk about monetary value when I'm dealing with this sort of Canadian history here. I've been told that his retirement letter would be worth in the neighborhood of £4,500 or about $10,000.
Really?
Just for this.
Oh my goodness.
Here we are, and we're not finished,
Oh my goodness.
Here we have a wonderful old traveling mirror. The mirror is not original, but we have this fantastic inscription here dated 1831, and the ship Dewdrop that he obviously moved around on. This would be worth in the neighborhood of about $3,500 or about £1,500. But then we get to the pièce de résistance, as they say. This jacket would easily command a value in the neighborhood of £15,000 to £20,000, which is about $35,000 to $45,000. And altogether here we have a neighborhood of about £25,000 or $50,000 to $60,000 just for this. But beyond that, the historical importance is and the fact that you've kept all these things together, bravo.
Belongs to a friend of mine, right. And it was inherited by her late husband in 1940s, and I presume it had been in the family for quite a long time.
Quite a long time.
That's all I know.
Be interesting to see how far back in that family. It has that look of something that's been in a home for a long time.
I think it
you know, that
been.
sort of
yes.
sort of aura about
yes.
it. It's just a cupboard with, when you look closely, some oval panels in the door, a fairly shallow bow front, and you could actually walk past it. You know, it's not. It doesn't stand and say something until you do stop and look. And then one starts to realize that these oval panels are in the center of a rectangle which has this lovely mitered corner of veneer. And when you start to look at that, you realize that this is not just any veneer. This is Satinwood, which was an extremely expensive, exotic veneer from the last quarter of the 18th century, when we first started to import it and use it. But it is the most expensive sort, which, ironically, was unstable. So a man was using this almost in the knowledge that, with time, it would crinkle.
Really?
And crack. Here, he'd had to put a piece in, and if you come to the top, you'll see these wonderful, almost dark as a conker look to this, almost a chestnutty colour, and yet it's this rippling, deep satinwood effect, deep satin effect. A little bit of damage to the top with the watermark, but that's cosmetic. Now, you then come to the oval panels themselves, and they are bordered and delineated with rosewood, a thin piece of ebony and a thin piece of boxwood to give it a black-white line. You'll see that repeated on there. There's a good example here. That goes all the way around. When this was new, the satin was bright yellow, pale yellow and dark, and then black, white, and then this grained satinwood around the outside forming crossbanding. Now, at the end of the 18th century, there were two designers of furniture in the classic style, both George Hepplewhite and Thomas Sheraton. Sheraton is the name that would come to mind largely because of the use of the satinwood. When we open this, here you have what could be straight out of Hepplewhite's drawing book. Rather than Sheraton, the use of mahogany inside here with two drawers which are 1775, 1795 in period and in shape, with a cock bead, original handle, and then for ultimate use you have adjustable slides. Faced up with mahogany, the back of which is pine. Absolutely traditional. And there it is, simplicity itself, but total use. So what at first looks like just a nice, well-designed cabinet or cupboard is in fact an exceptional piece of furniture. So goodness knows, this was made by an important maker. It could be someone like Inson Mayhew. It's as good as that. It's really quite remarkable. If one went into a good gallery where you'd have to go to buy such a piece as this today, you'd have to give between £25,000 and £30,000.
Well, I think she'll be rather startled.
I hope she'll be pleased with it.
It belonged to my father-in-law.
Right.
I know that he bought it in 1943 from a dealer in Tenby.
Right.
And we know it by James Webb.
Well, indeed, it is certainly by James Webb. I looked at the signature, as one always does with a picture, and it's down here, and you can't actually make James Webb from it easily. But the clue, really, for me, was the quality of the interpretation of this boat being hauled in and the figures. And indeed, the view through to the beach huts here, the typical sort of Victorian beach huts of the 1850s, 60s. Images, similar images, in fact, we saw earlier on in the programme. It must be one of the best pictures that Webb ever painted. It shows, I think this is Lexden Terrace, and a view right across the bay to Giltar Point, which is over here. A fantastic picture. There are a few points that I must say, as it were, on the downside of it. Its condition. No holes, but it is dirty. It is cracked. The paint is drying out in places. So it could do with some tender, loving care, frankly, to put it in good order. Now, have you ever had it valued?
No, we haven't.
Well, in its present condition, I would confidently value it at auction between about £20,000 to £30,000.
What's marvellous about this table, apart from the superb quality of the walnut and the burr walnut and the construction, is that on almost every single part you have this great Gillows stamp, which is very, very clear, all the way into the solid mahogany frame, both around the underside of the frieze and on the base as well. Now, they were a fantastically important firm of cabinet makers established in the 18th century who worked right the way through the 19th century. And they really reached arguably the height of their commercial success and powers during the Regency period and into the 1820s and 30s. And this is a sublime example of their work. It's a fantastic thing.
I've been left it by my late mother, and she purchased it by auction from Balborough Wholesale in 1938. And we are given to understand that there was only two that was made.
The best thing of all about the table is this fantastic top, which, I mean, couldn't be a better example of specimen marbles. If you were to try. Are you a chess player yourself?
Not at the moment.
Not at the moment. You've got really incredibly rare marbles. From laid onto a black marble ground, you've got exotic antique marbles like porphyry, bianco e nero, you've got Spanish Brocatel, Verde Antico, and you've even got malachite. And malachite is particularly interesting because from a dating point of view, that is one of the marbles that one can pin things down much more closely, because it didn't start to appear in Italian specimen marble tabletops until the sort of very early 19th century at the beginning, but was much more around the 1820s, 1830s.
Yes.
Almost certainly commissioned and bought on the Grand Tour in Italy.
Yes.
And then brought back to England, and Mr. Gillow then provided this incredible base.
I see.
Well, a table of this calibre and this quality does not appear on the market that often, and having a base that is by one of the greatest cabinet makers of all of the period, I should think at auction this sort of table would fetch somewhere between £30,000 and £40,000.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, this is a piece of silver from the officers' mess of the King's Royal Hussars, and it was presented to the 10th Hussars, Prince of Wales's own, by King George IV on his accession to the throne, to commemorate his time in command of the 10th Hussars.
Do you know what most people don't realise about these great centerpieces? Is what extraordinary construction kits they are. And if you don't get these in the right place, they don't necessarily fit properly. So do you know who made it?
We believe it was made by a silversmith called Paul Storr.
We've actually got a maker's mark appearing here, and the maker's mark there is PR. Now that is not Paul Storr's mark. In fact, the clue to the whole thing is, where are we? Here we are. The inscription that runs around here: Rundle, Bridge, et Rundle, Orifice Regis. Rundle, Bridge and Rundle, the royal goldsmiths. The maker's mark there is that of Philip Rundell. I would suggest the greatest firm that there has ever been in the history of silver. But what Rundell did was to develop this firm in Ludgate Hill so that you had the top goldsmiths of the day. He wanted all the top men. So Digby Scott, Benjamin Smith, James Smith, and Paul Storr. I mean, it's like a who's who of the Regency period. It is, of course, silver gilt, not gold, which I'm sure is what you realise. It would be pretty well impossible to pick up. Had you considered value?
Well, it's obviously insured amongst the regimental property in silver, and its last valuation, we believe about 10 years ago, had it in the area of £750,000.
Right, 750,000. I would go along with that. It is, after all, a unique piece, commissioned by the King for presentation to one of the greatest of all the regiments. I mean, what a piece to have.